25 people are scheduled to be executed in 2023. Here are the crimes they committed and the time that they spent on death row. Scott McLaughlin, 49 years old. He spent 19 years on death row in the state of Missouri, and he's scheduled to be executed on January 3rd, 2023. Beverly Gunter and Mr. McLaughlin started dating when they first met in 2002, and they eventually moved in together for a while. McLaughlin called and visited Miss Gunter frequently at her workplace during that time. Their relationship was characterized by tumultuous major splits, and on occasion, Miss Gunter had to file restraining orders against Mr. McLaughlin. Although they continued to see each other sometimes at social gatherings, their relationship ended in the spring of 2003. McLaughlin was detained on October 27, 2003, and he was accused of breaking into Miss Gunter's house. On November 18, 2003, he was charged. He said that he was returning items he left at the residence after they stopped cohabitating. In light of the occurrence, Miss Gunter requested and was granted a protection order against him. On November 20, 2003, McLaughlin traveled to Miss Gunter's place of employment while the protective order was still in place and waited until she left the office. Miss Gunter was knocked to the ground, raped, and then repeatedly stabbed by McLaughlin, leaving a fan-shaped bloodstain on the parking lot. To dispose of her body, McLaughlin hauled it to his car, put it in the hatchback, and drove to the river. McLaughlin was unable to place her body in the river and instead left it by the bank. He then went back to his parked car and slept inside because he had a flat tire from trying to get rid of the body. The following day, McLaughlin was driven by a friend to a hospital in St. Charles, where he was given medication to alleviate his heightened anxiousness and hyperactivity. The police found that McLaughlin had ripped off large pieces of cloth from the back seat and bleached the interior of his car. Despite his best attempts, Miss Gunter's blood was discovered in his automobile by the authorities. First-degree murder, forceful rape, and 2 counts of armed criminal action, one resulting from the murder accusation and the other from the rape charge, were all charges against McLaughlin. Robert Alan Fratta, 65 years old. He spent 28 years on death row in the state of Texas. He is scheduled to be executed on January 10, 2023. Farah Famida Baker was born in Surrey, England in August 1961. She was characterized as a free-spirited mother who loved her kids dearly. At the time, Robert Bob Fratta was a police officer and a firefighter, and Farah worked for American Airlines. They had been married for nearly 11 years. They have a daughter named Amber as well as 2 sons named Bradley and Daniel. Farah, however, resided in Humble, Texas, and the pair had previously been split. The 33-year-old went to get a haircut on November 9, 1994, but when she returned, she was met by an unknown assailant who shot Farah twice in the head as she exited the car and entered the garage. The culprit sped away in a getaway car as she lay in the garage. A neighbor who witnessed the events made a shooting report to 911. Farah was barely alive when the authorities came, so they quickly transferred her to a hospital by a helicopter so that she could be rescued. Sadly, Farah had already passed away. The next-door neighbor said to the police that she heard a pop, then saw Farah fall to the ground, then she heard another gunfire. Robert, Farah's husband, and their 3 kids had been attending the neighborhood church at the time. The police knew there were 2 suspects involved, but they thought Robert was somehow connected to the killing as well. About 2 years before the incident, Farah had filed for divorce. The 2 had also been engaged in a bitter custody dispute, with a hearing just a few weeks away. The police spoke with a few people at the gym where he exercised. One of those people was Mike Edens. He said that on one occasion, Robert told him, "I'm going to find a way to knock her off." Additionally, he informed the investigators that Robert allegedly questioned him about if he knew anyone who would murder his wife. The research turned up discussions the divorced husband had with over a dozen other persons that were very similar. Police were informed by witnesses from the church that while Robert was there, he frequently left to make and take phone calls. Records showed that Mary Jipp, who first exhibited little cooperation, was the subject of the calls. However, Joseph Priestash, her boyfriend, was an ex-con who worked out with Robert, and the police were aware of this. Mary gave a testimony after receiving immunity from prosecution. Mary knew Farah would be murdered on November 9, 1994. Yet she never called the police, which can only be described as puzzling. She then stated in court that Robert had Joseph kill Farah on his behalf. In accordance with the plan, Joseph spoke with Howard Guidry, a neighbor who was around 18 years old at the time. Howard would receive a $1,000 payment as the triggerman, and Joseph would serve as the getaway driver. Howard and Joseph also received the death penalty after Robert was found guilty of capital murder. Scott James Eizember, 62 years old. He spent 20 years on death row in the state of Oklahoma. He's scheduled to be executed on January 12, 2023. Scott James Eizember had spent his entire life taking advantage of people who were weaker than him. In the fall of 2002, the 42-year-old traveled from Michigan to the village of Depew in northeastern Oklahoma. There, he discovered a friendly, if not excessively trusting, community. He discussed his attempts to bicycle throughout the country, collecting donations for the 9/11 victims there. Eizember started dating a local nurse named Kathy Biggs. At first, Biggs' romance with the stranger appeared to be a welcome distraction from her failing marriage. Eizember's actual self, however, eventually started to emerge. After a fight involving Biggs' daughter, Biggs vowed to break things up. Eizember restrained the woman with duct tape and held a knife to her throat. The worst was still to come though. A.J. Cantrell, 76 years old, and his wife Patsy, 77 years old, who lived across the street from Biggs' mother, were killed on October 18, according to the police. Eizember was allegedly trying to ambush Biggs at the time. Tyler Montgomery, Biggs' 16-year-old son, was shot in the back when he got home by Eizember, who also badly battered Carla Wright, Biggs' mother. Biggs' kid was able to flee in a pickup truck for assistance. Eizember, however, got into the back of the car and fired a shot through the back window, hitting the young man once in the neck. After that, Montgomery rammed the car into a tree. Eizember managed to flee. The longest manhunt in the history of the state, the search for Eizember by Oklahoma officials lasted more than a month. On Sunday, November 23, a couple was returning from a funeral in Fort Smith when they noticed a man who appeared to require assistance close to Waldron. The couple's entire life had been dedicated to providing assistance, as Dr. Samuel and Suzanne Peebles had been working in the medical field for years. The man in need was none other than Eizember, who, after getting in the van, started acting strange and pulled a pistol on the couple. Dr. Peebles stopped the van on a country road outside Lufkin, Texas, after persuading Eizember to let them take a bathroom break 300 miles into the trip. Peebles remarked, "I realized this was my only opportunity to live. As I reached out of the driver's side door, I slouched down in my seat and grabbed Suzanne's revolver. I fired what I believed to be 4 rounds when he returned to the car, but the police later informed me that I had actually fired 9 shots. Only 4 shots found him." Eizember was handed up to Oklahoma authorities on December 4 after spending less than a week in a Texas hospital. Wesley Lynn Ruiz, 43 years old. He spent 16 years on death row in the state of Texas. He's scheduled to be executed on February 1st, 2023. On Friday, March 22, 2007, Wesley Lynn Ruiz was 27 years old and he was selling drugs in the western Dallas metropolitan area where he was a member of a gang. A 1996 Chevy Caprice with 4 doors, tinted windows, and chrome wheels was connected to a gruesome crime that had taken place 2 days previously, according to the DPD Homicide Division. On the Stemmons Freeway, detectives saw the vehicle and requested assistance. Wesley Ruiz was the driver of the car, and he was carrying an AR-15 rifle. When Mark Nix, 33 years old, answered the call from his colleagues in the Homicide Division, he saw the automobile traveling along Mockingbird Lane west of the Dallas metropolitan area. Wesley Lynn Ruiz's car was just behind the officer as he approached. Wesley Lynn Ruiz went out of his way to play with the pursuing DPD officers. He started the Chevy Caprice off at an inconsistent speed before abruptly stopping it. The police were on the verge of striking the car they were pursuing at full speed multiple times. Patrol cameras captured every detail. Wesley Ruiz hit a curb during the high-speed chase. Immediately he lost control of the Chevy Caprice and the vehicle accelerated up a slope meadow next to the road. Officer Mark Nick's police vehicle was the only one that followed the gang member's vehicle. Ruiz's car became stuck as a result of the blow and the incline of the slope. Armed only with his metal baton, patrolman Mark Nix bravely leaped out of his squad car and pursued the Chevy Caprice. A shower of bullets instantly put an end to his life. Other DPD officers engaged Wesley Lynn Ruiz in gunfire, and despite the barrage of bullets, they managed to remove their gravely wounded colleague from the crime scene. Ruiz continued to fire his AR-15 at the police, which increased the tension. Dallas Fire Department paramedics were at the scene quickly. However, the heroic officer passed away while receiving medical attention in the emergency hospital, despite their best efforts. Ruiz received medical attention for his wounds before going to court. 1 year after killing Officer Mark Nix, he was given the death penalty in Dallas County. Leonard Sheldon Taylor, 58 years old. He spent 18 years on death row in the state of Missouri. He is scheduled to be executed on February 7, 2023. The bodies of Angela Rowe and her 3 children were found at Rowe's home on December 3, 2004, according to the authorities. The home was locked, so the officers broke through a bedroom window to get inside. A TV was on inside and the air conditioner was set at 50 degrees. The front yard had newspapers and the mailbox held mail. According to an autopsy, Rowe had received 4 gunshot wounds total, 2 to her left arm, 1 to her chest, and 1 fatal one to her skull. Tyrese Conley, age 5, also had a fatal gunshot wound to the head, and Alexis Conley, age 10, Akria Conley, age 6, had 2 gunshot wounds to the head. According to the medical examiner, they had been dead for 2 to 3 weeks. Taylor was in a relationship with Rowe at the time of her death, and he was also married to Debreen Williams, who lived in California. On November 23rd, Taylor called his brother asking for money, and he also told him that he killed Angela during a fight and he was also going to murder the children. Several days later, when he was asked how he was still in that house with the bodies, he said that he turned the air conditioning on. On December 9, Taylor was taken into custody at the residence of another girlfriend in Madisonville, Kentucky. Taylor was seen exiting the residence while resting on a vehicle floorboard by police, who were keeping an eye on the premises. Taylor went using the identity Jason Lovely at the time of his arrest. A DNA test later showed that a blood stain on one of 3 pairs of Taylor's sunglasses that police discovered in his luggage matched Rowe's blood. John Lezell Balentine, 54 years old. He spent 26 years on death row in the state of Texas. He is scheduled to be executed on February 8, 2023. Balentine crept through a window to enter a house that he once shared with Misty Kaler early on January 21, 1998, armed with a .32 automatic revolver. As they slept, 3 teenagers, Mark Kaler Jr., 17 years old, Misty's brother, Kay Geyer, 15 years old, and Stephen Brady Watson, 15 years old, were shot and killed by Balentine once he was inside. Headshots were fired at each victim. When Balentine was apprehended in Houston after fleeing to New Mexico, he admitted to the crimes. Balentine said he left the house due to drug use there in a taped statement to police that was aired at his 1999 trial. Balentine related how he sneaked inside the house and shot the teens in the head one by one because the brother of his then girlfriend wanted to kill him first. After hearing a gunshot, a neighbor dialed 911. Balentine provided a bogus name when he was questioned by an officer who responded to the report while he was 50 yards away from the residence, strolling down the street. The police released Balentine after discovering an unfired .32 caliber bullet in his pocket, since carrying a bullet wasn't against the law. It took the police 6 months to catch up to Balentine once they found out about the triple homicide later that day. Richard Eugene Glossip, 60 years old. He spent 27 years on death row in the state of Oklahoma. He is scheduled to be executed on February 16, 2023. Barry Van Treese was killed by Justin Sneed on January 7, 1997, using a baseball bat. The murder took place at the Best Budget Inn in Oklahoma City, where Glossip was the manager. Sneed was the maintenance worker and Van Treese was the hotel's owner. Sneed confessed and admitted to the police that Glossip had given him the order to kill the victim in exchange for being spared the death penalty. Glossip resisted taking a plea deal because he claimed he was truly innocent. A jury in Oklahoma found Glossip guilty of the murder in July 1998, and they also gave him the death penalty. The conviction was overturned in 2001 by the unanimous Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals, which described the prosecution's evidence as very poor and said Glossip had unconstitutionally inadequate legal representation. A second Oklahoma jury found Glossip guilty of the murder in August 2004 and gave him the death penalty again. Glossip claimed that his defense attorney had resigned because of intimidation by the prosecution. However, the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the death penalty in April 2007, with 2 judges voting in favor, 1 judge specifically concurring, and 2 judges against. Sister Helen Pregine advocated for Glossip, but she was unsuccessful in persuading the clemency board to take into account letters from Sneed's relatives who think Sneed is lying. This execution is controversial because Glossip was almost entirely convicted based on Sneed's testimony, which he used to avoid the death penalty himself. Gary Green, 51 years old. He spent 13 years on death row in the state of Texas. He is scheduled to be executed on March 7, 2023. Lovetta Armstead, 32, was the mother of 3 kids named Jerome, Jarrett, and Jasmine. Before she met Gary Green, who she supposedly lived with for a year or 2 prior to getting married in 2009, she was a teacher and raised children as a young single mother. Unfortunately, on September 21, 2009, she tragically lost her life. Around 9:30 p.m., the police were summoned due to information about a possible homicide at Lovetta's residence. On the floor of the main bedroom, they discovered her face down. She had suffered 30 stab wounds. An autopsy also revealed some bruises on the side of her neck and signs of asphyxia. Having her wrists and legs bound with duct tape, Jasmine was discovered in the restroom. She was standing beside the tub. Also discovered tied around her ankles was a telephone cord. The results of Jasmine's autopsy showed that she had drowned. Additionally, there was bleeding from the top of her skull. Lovetta's boys, who were still living, informed the neighbors of the deaths. Gary Green, 38, handed himself in to the police just hours after the double homicide after being persuaded by his mother to do so. He immediately admitted to killing Lovetta and Jasmine. Lovetta decided to divorce Gary after just a few months of marriage. She hoped to get their marriage dissolved at that point because Gary had already left. However, he persuaded Lovetta to let him stay at the house on the day of the tragedy. Gary admitted to the police that the separation had made him angry. He said to the police, "My original goal was to kill all of us, as he believed they could all spend eternity together as a family." After taking a shower, he proceeded to the church to pick up the 2 boys who were then 9 and 12 years old. Gary even stabbed Jarrett in the abdomen while threatening to kill them both. However, the boys were able to persuade him otherwise. Gary then escorted them to the master bedroom and showed them the bodies. After he left, he requested that they contact the police. After dialing 911, the boys hurried over to their neighbor's home. Gary later attempted suicide by swallowing some drugs, but he later turned himself up. The murders were the subject of his October 2010 trial. Jemaine Monteil Cannon, 51 years old. He spent 28 years on death row in the state of Oklahoma. He is scheduled to be executed on March 9, 2023. On February 3, 1995, Jermaine Cannon killed his girlfriend Sharonda Clark by stabbing her to death. Cannon had just recently escaped from prison after being found guilty of an unrelated attack. Police learned that she had been stabbed 3 times in the throat and once in the chest center when she was located more than 24 hours later. Before being apprehended, Cannon spoke to his mother after the murder and claimed that he had used self-defense and that Clark had stumbled into the knife after she had attacked him. Cannon initially called Tulsa police and told Detective Tom Fultz about the attack before turning himself in to the police. Cannon acknowledged stabbing Clark in that chat, but he asserted that he did so only after she attacked him and he lost his cool. He received the death penalty. Arthur Brown Jr., 52 years old. He spent 31 years on death row in the state of Texas. He's scheduled to be executed on March 9, 2023. 4 people were shot and killed on June 20, 1992 during a narcotics sale at a house in Houston. When they decided to rob Jose and Rachel Tovar of their drugs and money, Marion Dudley, Arthur Brown Jr., and Tony Dunson went to their house to buy 3 kilograms of cocaine. The trio entered the house and shackled 6 people before shooting them. 3 victims had already passed when the police arrived. Jose Tovar, Jessica Quinones, who was 7 months pregnant, and Frank Farias. Audrey Brown, one of the 3 survivors, eventually passed away in a hospital, bringing the total number of murder victims to 4. The last 2 survivors named Tony Dunson, Marion Dudley, and Arthur Brown Jr. as their attackers. The murderers fled the scene after the killings. They left the town after finding out that the police were looking for them as suspects in the killings. The group acquired a Jeep Cherokee and persuaded 2 two women to take them on a trip from Louisville, Kentucky to Louisville, Alabama in the vehicle. Once there, they bought tickets to Ohio using fictitious names. Then they departed for the north from Columbus. Although the police discovered the sports car they thought belonged to Dudley, it provided no fresh information. Dudley, Brown, and Dunson's families begged them to come forward, but they thought they were innocent. Dudley and Dunson were apprehended at a trailer in Fayetteville, North Carolina on July 8, 1992. Members of the Tuscaloosa County Metro Homicide Unit apprehended Brown on October 23, 1992 in an apartment in Northport, Alabama. Death row inmate Arthur Squirt Brown Jr. was found guilty of murder. He received a death sentence in November 1993. Of the three criminals, he was the first to be found guilty. The second of the three criminals to be found guilty was Marion Butler Dudley, who received a capital murder conviction as well. On January 23, 1995, he received the death penalty verdict. After being found guilty of capital murder, Antonio Lamone Dunson received a life sentence. He will become eligible for parole on July 8, 2027. Andre Lee Thomas, 40 years old. He spent 19 years on death row in the state of Texas. He's scheduled to be executed on April 5, 2023. Thomas murdered Laura Boren, his estranged wife, his son, age 4, and her daughter, age 1, in Sherman, Texas in 2004. The two children's hearts were taken from their bodies after he hacked open the chests of all three victims. When Boren fell pregnant with his child, Thomas was in the 9th grade. Thomas's mental health issues started when he was around 10 years old and manifested as auditory hallucinations. Thomas was 18 when they got married, but they soon divorced. He had suicidal ideas, he drank a lot, and took cold medicine as a recreational drug in the weeks before the murders. On March 27, 2004, Thomas entered Boren's flat on the 3rd floor and slammed the door. Boren was at home with her two kids while her partner was at work. Thomas killed her by stabbing her, opening her chest, and taking a part of her lung while believing to be removing the heart. He entered the room that his 4-year-old boy and Boren's 13-month-old daughter shared. He fatally stabbed both kids and then severed their hearts from their chests. Thomas stabbed himself 3 times in the chest after killing the kids. He entered the living room and laid down next to Boren's body, expecting to pass away from his wounds. He put the victim's organs in his pockets after realizing he wasn't going to die, and he headed home. He then put the organs in a bag and discarded them in the garage when he got home. Thomas handed himself in to the Sherman Police Department, where he told the authorities that he believed God had ordered him to murder the victims. He claimed that he used a different knife to kill each victim because he believed that the victims contained devils. He reasoned that if the blood from the victims was allowed to mix, the demons might live. Thomas underwent chest surgery after being transported to the hospital. His story has prompted debate over the morality of capital punishment on mentally ill people. Anthony Castillo Sanchez, 44 years old. He spent 26 years on death row in the state of Oklahoma. He's scheduled to be executed on April 6, 2023. Julie Busken was taken from her apartment on December 20, 1996 and was later raped and killed. The following day, her body was discovered on the shore of a lake about 15 miles from her residence. Her body had foreign DNA on it. Anthony Sanchez was detained for the rape of a previous girlfriend 6 years after the initial offense and was required by Oklahoma law to provide his DNA. Authorities asserted that Sanchez's DNA was an exact match to the DNA discovered on Busken's body. Sanchez was apprehended, accused, found guilty, and given the death penalty based on DNA evidence, as well as a variety of secondary circumstantial evidence. He is claiming to be innocent based on an initial police sketch that does not resemble him. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Now go watch this video of the last words of all women executed in the US. See you next time. Bye bye.